Welcome back, csc235 or even csc103 class, who's ever watching this, to part 2 of our EX7 random SpongeBob image. If you're in the csc103 class, it will not be EX7, but you'll be doing the same thing. And what we're going to do here for part 2 is we're going to display the image, and we're even going to resize the image. Let's resize it first so we have enough room to see that. And we're going to use CSS to do that. So we'll go in CSS. Now to target our image, we could target our ID. Our ID is pick, but what we really want to do is make sure that we target the image that's inside pick. So you could do this. You could just target pick and use the # pick and target the ID, and then do a space and do Img. That means it's going to be the image inside there. That it's going to be somewhere inside there, and we're going to have an image tag that's going to be inside there. So I could do that. That's one way to do it. There's other ways to do it. If it's the only image on the page, I could just have image. But I'll make sure I specify that it's going to be the image inside. When you have a space, that means it's inside that, or it's a kind of child of that. So I'm going to do that first, and that's how I'm going to target this style. And I'm just going to put height, and I'm going to do 300 pixels, because that about works for what we're doing so that our name displays, at least for what we're doing here. And that's all we need. And then I'm going to go back to my JavaScript, and I'm going to add one more statement here, and it could be just like this statement. It's going to be a little bit different, but it's going to be just like this. And I'm going to just copy this one and paste it. And instead of the ID being pick, the ID is going to be the one right below it, which is called a name. Now don't get confused with names. Names is our array that we have our names in, but name is actually the ID name. So that's that one. So maybe there's another way to do that that isn't confusing, but so I'll put name in here. Make sure you don't put names. But what is going to go here is names, because now we are going to pull from the array. The array is called names. So the ID is name, the array is called names, and we're going to use the same random number, because since this random number is generated here right in the function, let's say it generates a 3. That means it's going to use a 3 here, and it'll use a 3 here. It won't generate a different one to go in here. So that means if it's 3 here, 0, 1, 2, 3, it'll be Sandy, and then it'll go 0, 1, 2, 3, Sandy Cheeks for the name. So that should work out pretty well when we do that. So it'll just plug in that string up inside our HTML for the H2 tag. And then we could change the color then after that. So let's just see if that works first, and that should work, because it doesn't seem like there wasn't a lot to do here. So I'll save it. And there's my images. And everything's working okay. And one thing I just want to point out here, and I'll do this quick, if you wanted to change the fonts here, now obviously you could use font family and things like that, but let's say you just wanted to change your headline font, and I'll go into my CSS, and I'll do it before here. I'm going to change my headline font, and I'll target that, and let's say I want to change that font. Typically you would go font family, but before I even do that, let's take a look at assets, because they have fonts here, and they have Google fonts. So let's say you wanted to use Roboto. Now they don't have a lot of choices here. If you really want more choices, you should go to Google Fonts. And actually, maybe I'll show you how to do that. Let's go to Google Fonts, and let's look for a nice kind of, I'll go to Google Fonts, and I'll just look for Serif Fonts. And the one I do like is Roboto Slab. And I think there's another one called Bitter or something. Here it is. It's called Bitter. I like that one. Here's Bitter, and I'll make a bold one. I'll try the bold one here. And I'm going to use this font from Google Fonts. And notice it's fonts.google.com. If you just search Google Fonts, you'll find it. Now, how do you use this? Well, what you do is you hit the little plus sign here, and that basically kind of saves it for you. Now, if you wanted to use something else, you could. Like if you wanted to use a sans serif font. Let me just click this off, and I'll go to sans serif. And let's say I'm going to use, now some of these are already in, maybe I'll use Source Sans Pro. That's a popular sans serif font, and I'll just use the regular right here, and I'll add that. Okay, and then I'll go down here to what I have selected, and I can actually go to Customize, and I can see that I have Source Sans Pro regular, and that's all I want, and I have Bitter 700. That's all I want. If you wanted more, if you wanted a regular and a light or any other ones, you can check them here. But it loads faster if you don't check a lot of fonts. And maybe I'll put a bold here just in case I want to use one. Now it's already saying load time moderate. So I'll go back to here. Now there's two ways you could do this. One is you could put this in your HTML portion. It has to actually link to Google to get the font. But I'm going to use this import. That does the same thing, but you could put this in your CSS. But one thing to keep in mind is you will not use the style tags because those are HTML tags. So you can put this, you can basically copy and paste this into your CSS section. And then when you use font family, you're going to use this. So I'm just going to copy these things right from Google. I'm going to copy this first. This contains both fonts, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to put it at the beginning of my CSS. So I'll put it right here, and that includes both fonts, and that's all you need. And then I'm going to go back to Google Fonts, and I'll copy these. These are basically the font families. Now, they don't put all different fonts in here, other choices. They just kind of put the generic sans serif and serif after it. So if there's anything you want to use in case they don't have bitter, you could put that in there. Or if in case they don't have Source Sans Pro, you could put Arial or something in there. But I'm going to copy that too. And I'll go back to here. Now, where would you put that? That goes in your CSS except where you want it. And there it is. I'll paste it there. Now, I pasted two. If you had ever pasted two, it would use the second one. But what I really want is I want for body, I want my general one. I'm just going to put body. And body is kind of encloses everything, so that's more like a default. I'm going to make one for body. And I'm actually going to put a margin on here too. While I'm here, I'll put a margin of like, 20 pixels or something, just to create some margin on our page. And then also, I'm going to put this Source Sans one in there, because that'll be kind of the default. And then for just the H1, we'll use bitter. So I'm going to use Source Print. And then if you're not sure, you could put, like Arial. So if there's something else that doesn't come up, you could put Arial as a third choice. And so I'll get this out of here. So I want body, and that'll be body for everything. So again, using Google Fonts, you have to link to the fonts because it basically uses them online. They use fonts that people don't have on their system, which gives you a lot bigger choice. And maybe I want to use Georgia as a second choice here in case bitter doesn't load or something like that. I have something else other than times to use. So I'm using body for everything, Source Sans Pro, and then I'm using bitter. My 700, that should be the only one I have here, and it should use that with an H1. And what I could also do, I'm going to put a comma here, and I'm going to put H2. That means both the H2 and the H1 will use that, and that's because we have an H2 down here. That way they could both use that font without making a separate declaration for that. If I use a comma in here, it means it's going to use both of those. It's going to target both of those elements, and they're both going to use font family, and all their other properties they'll keep. So we'll see how that works. That didn't take that long to do that. And I'll close this thing up. And again, you could have done that from here, because if you use one of these, it shows you copy the import, it copies the font family. That's the same thing we did from here. We copied the import, not the style tags, and then we basically copied the font family stuff down here. So that's kind of what we did. The only thing in here, they don't give you a lot of choices because they want you to sign up for the Pro feature, to get access to everything. So let me close that up. And now you can see that's in that nice font. If you wanted to give it a nice color or something, you could do that. So even with, now I don't want to actually, now here's the problem. If I wanted to give the H1 a color and not the H2, I'd have to kind of make them separate. But now if I wanted to do a color of the headline, I would have to do one of just the H1. And I'll just use a property of color, and I'll go back to assets because they have colors in here. And I'll just pick a nice kind of, nice purple color would look nice. And I'll put it here, and that my H1 will be in that color, not my H2. The H2 will only inherit the font family. So let me do that, and I'll close up this. And look at that, look how nice that looks. And the reason I didn't do this one, because we're going to assign a color with our JavaScript. So that's what we're going to do next. And we're going to assign a random color, and that means we're going to make another list here, and I'll copy this list or this array, and I'll call it colors. Now, what kind of colors am I going to use? Well, for SpongeBob, I might use gold. Now, where to get these gold? Here, and I'll go to my Google Fonts, and I'll just go to W3 Schools. And usually if you go anywhere, you could find colors, but I'm going to go to HTML colors, and I think they have a list. Here's standard colored names. Now here's some ones right here, but you can use color names instead of always using hex colors. But I'll go here to get this list, and you can see, notice the way they use them with capital A, capital B. When there's two words together, they don't use any spaces and they use capital letters, and they start with capital letters. So if I wanted gold, for example, it's in alphabetical order. If I wanted gold for SpongeBob, so it's a little darker than the yellow, I could use that. So I could go back here, and for SpongeBob, I'm going to use gold. For Patrick, I'll use pink. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a pink there. For Squidward, maybe I'll use a kind of, I don't know what color Squidward is. Maybe I'll use a greenish one, light sea green. And note, I'll type it, but I'll just look at it light sea green, or I could copy it and make sure I get rid of any spaces or anything that I copied by mistake, because there's a space after it. And Sandy might be brown, so I'm just going to type in brown. And Crabs, maybe we'll do dark orange. And maybe Larry will do red. Okay, so these are just colors, so I just copied that, and these are the colors I'm going to use, and I am going to put them in quotes. So I'm going to highlight, I'm going to hold Control or Command and highlight each name here, or each color, and wrap it in quotes by just going Shift Quote. And now I have an array of colors, and they match up to the ones here. So whatever random number we generate is going to pull the same one here. So it'll use SpongeBob. So if it's 0, it'll use SpongeBob image, SpongeBob SquarePants name, and it'll use gold color. Now all we have to do here is just put the color in here. We'll just do another property. We won't be writing anything. What we'll be doing is saying name, except we'll be using style.color, because remember the name is the H2 element. That's the ID of the H2 element. And I'm going to say equals, and what we're going to be using is going to be colors, the array name, and in here we're going to use the RN. And make sure you close it off. So they'll all be using the same random number in here, except this time it'll be applying the color. So I'll save that and see how it works. And there, that's in pink. And if I wanted to find a different color, you know, if I thought that was too, you know, I could use a darker pink, you know, or something. I could change it, you know, orchid or something like that. Or here's pale violet red. I could use pale violet red, might look a little better. I would just put it up here and replace the pink and save it. Now I'll do it again. There's Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs. Now they're random, so they're not going through Squidward. Hey, that color looks pretty good. Just waiting to see. There's Patrick. That color looks better too. It's more like the outline on Patrick. It's a little easier to read. So that looks good. So everything looks good here. I could even find a darker gold color. Sandy cheeks, brown. I guess that looks okay. Could find a lighter color if I want, if that one doesn't work okay. And I think everything looks okay. So that's the main thing we want to do. So we got everything working here. And the last part we're going to do is just do a reset button. So I think because of the first video was so long, I think I'm going to take a break here, and then we'll just do one more quick video for part 3 of this exercise, and we'll just finish off with our reset button.